Hello, my name's Neil and welcome to my YouTube channel. Those are some words I never thought I'd say, but here we are. Basically, I'm a classic car, hot rod, motorcycle enthusiast builder. As an amateur, I do it in my own time as it's my hobby. I do it for my own amusement, and I always have done, and I think I always will do. But in recent years, with Instagram and Facebook and that sort of thing being what it is, inevitably I put photos and videos and things on there, and I've actually had a surprising, to me anyway, amount of people reply to them and say, if you film this stuff and put it on YouTube, I'd watch it. So I resisted for quite a while because I'm aware that, it's enough work in the first place to be building this stuff, but then to film it and edit it and everything else is a lot more work. It takes a lot of effort. So I'm going to do my best. Like I say, I'm a complete amateur when it comes to any of the filming side of stuff. But I'm going to do my best. So stick with it if it's the kind of thing you're interested in. It's not going to be a how-to video as such, because as I say, I'm an amateur. Who am I to tell you that it's the right way or the wrong way? But I like to think I know enough to build something, safe and cool looking, which is definitely the two most important things when you talking about sort of any classic vehicle. Like I say, hot rods and stuff and American stuff, that's my my main thing. My absolute baby, best thing I've ever built so far is this 1930 Model A Ford. I'll stick a picture up now. And most recently, I've built a 1960 Triumph chopper. I'll stick a picture of that up now. But for this project, I'm sort of going back to my roots really, and doing something based on an air-cooled Volkswagen, which is it's on the more affordable end of the classic car scale. They're super simple as far as old cars go, easy to work on. You can get any parts that you want. I've always wanted a beach buggy. I did kind of start one years ago, but that was when I was much too young and irresponsible to actually follow through with the project. But since then I've built some stuff which is, I think, a lot more complex than this. So I'll be going back to like I say, to my roots, to build something that I've always wanted one. So yeah, this is going to be part one of a series. I don't have a clue how long it's going to be. I don't have a clue how regular the videos are going to be, but I'm sort of doing it to document the build from start to finish. As I say, if you're interested in it, watch it. If you're not, I won't be upset. This is going to be something that I would be building anyway, regardless if I was filming it or not. So it's going to be a probably tricky thing to get the hang of. So the videos might be a bit shakier. Don't expect a super high production value or anything like that, but I'm going to do my best. And at the end of it, we're going to end up with a beach buggy and a video of building that beach buggy. So here we go, part one of building a beach buggy with me. Oh, this is weird. Before I go any further into this, I have to assume that if you're watching it, you know what a beach buggy is, you know where they came from. But if you don't, I'll give you a very, very brief history lesson. Basically, in the 1960s, early 60s in California, people were racing up and down the sand dunes in 1920s, 1930s Fords that they could pick up cheap, remove the body shells from them. They're basically driving a ladder with four wheels with an engine and a seat on top. Great fun, but very ugly looking. A bit clunky, bit heavy, not ideal. Now, Bruce Meyers, probably, I think, one of the coolest guys to ever exist. Sadly, no longer with us. He was a hot rodder, was part of this scene. Decided that there was a better option, and not just for performance, but for looks. He thought he could build something better looking. So he had a fair amount of experience with boat building, so working with fiberglass. So he then designed a body shell, short wheelbase fiberglass body shell, which was known as the Meyers Manx. Basically the first beach buggy ever created. Now, he also realised that if it was very small, very light, it didn't need a huge amount of horsepower to be loads of fun and work really well. And a cheap source of suspension, running gear, engine, gearbox was Volkswagen Beetles. You could pick up an old Beetle for absolutely peanuts, separate the body shell from the chassis, chop the chassis in half, shorten it down by 15 inches or so, weld it back together, mount your beach buggy body shell on top. There you go. Instant fun, very easy, very cheap. He produced a good few thousand of these buggies in the 60s, and it didn't take long for people to start copying his design, basically. Some people thought they could improve it. Nobody did. Manx is still by far, in my opinion, the best looking beach buggy to ever exist. It spawned all sorts of weird and wonderful and not so wonderful copies, I guess. But the Manx is the definitive buggy as far as I'm concerned, and most other people are concerned. Now, the likelihood of me getting an original Manx body, slim to none. They go for huge money. There was only ever a few thousand of them back then anyway. The good news is there are now hundreds of thousands of beach buggies around, and many people reproducing the old style body shells. Now, the Meyers Manx was built under license from Bruce Meyers while he was still alive in the UK in the early 2000s. That company, I believe, ceased trading 10 or so years after that. And the mould that those bodies were produced from was passed on to another guy, who is Rob from East Coast Buggies, who very kindly built me my body shell. He'll build you whatever colour you want, whatever finish you want, whether it's metal flake or plain gel coat. Does a really nice job. There's other people producing the same thing, basically. Rob is the guy that I chose to go with. Super nice guy, really neat work. I've already got the body. I'll be showing you that a bit later on, and it is awesome. Looks seriously cool. So yeah, that's the very brief history. If you want to dig a little bit more, there's some brilliant videos on YouTube, short documentaries on Bruce Meyers. Like I say, really interesting guy, really clever guy, and spawned a giant movement for these things, which, yeah, if you've ever seen one, you can't help but smile when you see one. They're super cool, super fun, and that's why I'm building one. So, history lesson over. Like I say, punch the name into YouTube, watch a few videos, educate yourself on it, and if you don't think they're the coolest things on the planet, then this probably isn't for you. Now, let's get chopping some stuff up. My favourite bit. Before it got to this stage, obviously it was a complete car, so stripped it all down, and then steam cleaned the entire chassis to get all the years worth of gunk and grime and everything off it. So I'll show a few shots of that now. I recorded that a little while ago. So yeah, here it starts, I guess.
To the good fight that everyone is really feeling now. The music is still flowing.
so here's where I currently am. Got a stripped down 1968 Volkswagen Beetle chassis. I bought the entire car. It was a total basket case. It had been sat in a field for ages. Didn't pay a huge amount for it. This is why, because it's pretty rotten. But we have 2 brand new floor pan halves to replace those. We've got a new Napoleon's hat panel. Wonder why they call it that. And a new frame head down there to replace this one, because that's also rotten as a pair. It's going to get cut here and here, 15 inches removed out the middle, welded back together, and then we'll be on our way. Sounds easy, doesn't it? Okay, so step 1 is going to be removing these floor pan halves so that I'm just left with this central chassis spine, which I can then shorten on its own and then weld in the floor pan halves, which are, they're actually already shortened. They're a fairly recent thing and been around for a few years. Years ago, what people would have to do is cut through these floor pans. They usually go sort of diagonally across here and weld them back together, but what with all the ribs and lumps and bumps and everything, it never looked amazing. It was never perfect. But a company, another UK company, Flat Out Customs, produced these ready shortened floor pan halves. If these things were around years ago, they would have sold thousands of them. But pretty much any buggy that's based on these Volkswagen Beetle chassis now will use these floor pan halves, because it's so much better than chopping down the originals. So let's trim some fat off this thing. There's a sort of flange on the bottom of the chassis tunnel there, where the floor pan sits on top and is spot welded through there. So to make it easier to remove, I'm just going to zip round here with a grinder, take the bulk of this out, and then I could just remove that strip around the outside and have a more manageable piece to work with. So let's get chopping. Okay, turn the chassis over so now I can zip, cut all that out. Let's go. Okay, that's the pan halves removed. Still got the edge of them around the outside there, which needs to be, you know, carefully pried away so as not to damage the part that I do want to keep. But this just makes it far easier to remove. I'll take a minute to point this out. You can see where this floor pan, you can just see it in the light. See the seam sealer line there, cross there, cross there. This thing has been patched up so many different ways and not very well, to be honest. Now, a few years ago, I would curse people for doing what I think are poor repairs like this, until a wise man said to me a few years ago, this is the repair that could have kept the car on the road. It could have saved it from being sent to the scrap heap. So even though, you know, it's an awful repair, didn't exactly last forever, it might have just been that thing that just kept it going, which enables me to be mucking about with it today. If it wasn't for that, probably would have got dumped years ago. So I don't get upset about that stuff anymore. Just chop it out, do it properly. I find that the best way of separating where the floor pan was welded on the top there is to just go along with a knackered old wood chisel and a hammer and just gradually chisel it off. Then all you're left with is these little nubs where the spot welds were, and you can just sand those off with a grinder. You could use a spot weld drill and drill through from the top, but the problem is you can't even see where the spot welds are on something this old and rusty. And also you have the danger of drilling too far through and coming out the other side. So next couple of hours is going to be spent just gradually chipping away, peeling away the bits we don't want. Easy. Some of the other stuff you'll see me removing here is this factory sound deadening, which is horrible, sticky tar-based stuff. So a good tip for getting it off is that stuff, pipe freeze. Plumbers use it for freezing pipes so they can, you know, freeze the water inside and cut the pipe. But it freezes this stuff. And then chips off dead easy. Now, it's actually coming off not too bad without the pipe freeze, which is a bonus because the stuff's about 11 quid a can, I think. So just a bit of perseverance, trusty old chisel again, bit of elbow grease, comes off. Not fun, but it'll come off. That's the floor pan halves all removed. Still got all these little bits here to grind off, obviously. One side, this side put up a little bit more of a fight where the old repaired floor pans are bugger welded in, but it came out fairly easy. One thing is a little bit of a bummer. We got, where is it? A little bit of rot in the bottom of the spine there, and a bit more on that side there. So we'll end up chopping these parts out and welding new parts in. Not a big deal. I think the days of finding rust-free chassis for these things are pretty much done. So overall, it's pretty good. So next up, need to remove this panel and the frame head. You might have noticed that I've clamped an old scaffold tube in the top half of where the front beam, or front axle if you like, mounts. The reason for that is so I can get my tape measure in the side, take a measurement from side to side, say to the centre of those bolt holes or something like that, so that when I fit the new one, I can make sure that everything is, you know, if the side to side measurement is the same, and I've got a little digital spirit level, so if I sit that on the torsion spring housing on the back and on this tube on the front, once I chop that section out the middle, as long as this line here is straight and that is parallel with that, and those two measurements from side to side are the same, then we know it's all straight. The trick here is just to take as many measurements as possible, make a note of them, because you will need to know that stuff. After chipping away all the underseal around this panel, it looks like there's a little stitch weld down there and a weld just over this portion on the top on both sides. So my logic is, I could try and cut that weld out from this side, but I'd probably end up cutting into the tunnel. So it's literally rotted out around here, it's going to fall out around there. So my plan is to cut up around there, around both sides, remove this, and then I can peel this that way, and then carefully cut that weld out, remove those pieces, and it should come off hopefully pretty easy.
It's on a downward slope. Will you
That's cut free. Now it shouldn't take a great deal of effort to get it out. Hammer time. There we go. Easy. Now I'd be tempted to chuck this in the bin normally, but the replacement panel is only available in left-hand drive. So this hole for the brake master cylinder is on the left-hand side. Before you say, just turn it around, Neil, you can't, because they're not symmetrical. So that's got to go that side. So we're going to need this one as a reference to drill the holes to put the brake master cylinder on the right-hand side. You got to be thinking 10 steps ahead all the time. That's working pretty good, as you see, peeling off there, sort of hitting it off from this way. I'm going to have all this, you know, the remainder of the weld and everything to grind off. Found a bit more rot under here. That's going to need cutting out and replacing, but it's what I expected, to be honest. Not too bad. After cleaning all this away, I was half expecting to find a join somewhere under here, because you'll see that this section comes all the way to here, which would end up about there. But what they've done with the new panel, which is pretty cool, is given you a section of of chassis spine. So that's basically the same profile as this part here. Now, if I were to cut this to align with this, it would be a bit too close for my liking to where the joint is going to be for the panel on top. So what I'll do is I'll trim some of this away, make sure everything's all straight and aligned properly, cut a nice straight line over there, remove a section of this. That way I can cut this a little bit further forward, so I can have a nice weld, nice and clear of everything else that's going to be going on here. That's the plan. So it's just going to be plenty of marking out, measure 10 times, cut once. That's the theory. My plan to make my life as easy as possible here is, because I'm going to be removing all of this business, there's not going to be a lot left. I could do with like a reference line, a baseline to measure everything to. So what I've done is I've got a piece of card, cut nice and square on all four sides, aligned with the bottom of the tunnel there, measured from side to side, either side, to make sure it's all square and true every way possible. And that way I can just get a Sharpie, draw a line over the top, and then reference everything to that line. That's going to make my life so much easier. Now, I'm going to have a little bit of a moan here, because one of my pet peeves is when I see people trying to make templates or anything like that with this stuff, corrugated card. Now, the best craftsman in the world couldn't make a usable template with that stuff. It's rubbish. Look at it. Rubbish. Get rid of that. Go to the craft shop, buy a few sheets of that. It's about £1 a sheet, I think. Just buy loads of it, stick it in your toolbox. You make perfect templates with that stuff, and it costs next to nothing. Easy. Corrugated card? No. Proper card? Yes. While I'm at it, another little tip. So many people don't bother to have one of these in their toolbox. Just a normal tailor's tape measure. They're so handy for things, if you're measuring round curves and things like that, trying to bend the steel tape measure around it, not very accurate. One of these, again, cheap as chips. Get one, stick it in your toolbox, thank me later. These are cool as well. Just magnets. Magnets with little handles on. Simple, cheap stuff that will make your life a lot easier. Okay, so we've measured same distance from here to here, so I've got a nice straight line to cut. Once again, another victory for the little magnets. Now, that plus that is going to equal that on the floor. There's something in there holding it together. What is it? You see in there? Yeah, a bit dark in there. I'll get it. There we go. Okay, we're in. That's what the piece was that was just holding us up there on the inside. It's sort of double walled there on the inside, and it only goes, you know, another inch or so into there. So to replicate the strength of that, I don't know, I might trim that out, put another piece in there, might put a piece over the top, but to be honest, a big fat MIG weld over the top of that, it's going to be strong. We'll figure that out when we come to it. So we've got a bit of rot in these bottom portions here, so again, we'll trim those out around there, replace that. One of the benefits of whipping the frame head off like this, you know, if it wasn't rotten, I wouldn't be cutting it off. But it's actually quite handy to get inside, because that's where your fuel line runs down there, and you know, all your cables and whatnot. I'm going to run the brake pipes down there as well, because they normally sit on the outside there. Looks a bit naff. Seeing as I've got access to the inside, I'm going to route everything I can down the middle, make it nice and clean as possible. This makes a lot more sense now that I've got everything cut out. Now this is all cut and cleaned up, I assumed that this section here was the same shape as the tunnel, but it's actually slightly smaller, so I'm assuming it's designed to set underneath this slightly, which is great, because that means all I have to do is remove this little portion inside there. You can just see that, and that will fit snugly over the top of that, oversailing this by an inch or so. So not only can I run a nice big fat weld on the join, if I want to, I can also drill a few holes through here and plug weld it through there as well. So it'll be super strong. Perfect. I assume that's how it's meant to go. Either way, that's how it's going. That's worked pretty well. Just chop that part out of there. Couldn't quite get in there with the grinder, so just carefully with the Dremel to make sure I only cut through that skin and not through the outer skin. Come out nice and easy. That should work. Okay, so cut these sections out here where there was a bit of rot. In the actual lower portion, this front section here must have had a bit of an area where water could collect inside. So this is you know, full of little holes like that. So I trimmed it back there. Now what I'm going to do is, you can see where it's been spot welded along these joins there, which, if you're not familiar with what that is if you've got two flat sheets of metal, you can sort of see there, two pieces put together, basically two electrodes that go either side, pinch it like that, zap it with electricity, and that permanently bonds them together. When you need to remove those, there's a few different ways you can do it, like you saw earlier on when I removed that section there with a chisel. This part, because I can see where the spot welds are, one of the best ways to do it is with one of those, which is a spot weld drill bit. See, it's got that tiny little sort of spike on the end. You can see that. So what you do is find your spot weld, center punch it, so you've got a little dimple there. That little spike will locate in it, and then you just carefully drill, and you notice that the end of the drill bit is sort of flattened off. So the idea of that is you just drill through one sheet of steel, and then you can effectively peel it away. It's a bit of a game, a little bit of trial and error. It's not my favourite job in the world, but thankfully I've only got a couple of little bits to do. So that's next. So there you can see where I've drilled through, and it's just gone through this top layer here. So a little bit of waggling, we should be able to get that off. There we go. Another bit for the bucket. Okay, so after chopping out all the rot and everything on the front there, I've got the Framehead temporarily mounted. My plan here is, obviously eventually it'll be welded on, but for the time being I thought I'd get everything located all as square as possible, get everything in the right place, and then I've just bolted it. I've just drilled and tapped some holes in there so that I can remove it and reinstall it in the same position, because it's just going to be handy to have access to the inside of the tunnel there. And obviously once this is welded on there, access is limited to this tiny little hole there. So that's the plan there. As I was explaining earlier, check my measurements from side to side all the way back to the torsion spring housing. It's exactly the same on both sides, and got my little digital level box there, see, zeroed out. Plonk that on the front there. Actually put it on straight. And there we go. It's sort of fluctuating. It's, yeah, near as damn it to zero. So that's pretty good for like temporary mounting, basically. So what's next? Next, we've got a prime example of what happens when you use, you know, reproduction parts, especially panels. They're often close-ish as far as the fit goes, but they almost always require a bit of massaging, bit of violence sometimes to get them to fit. So you can see this panel fits over here. We're a good half an inch clear of sitting where it needs to on the frame head there. Good half an inch clear at the top, but we're making contact on either side there. So what I need to do is open this out. It's going to take a little bit of persuading with the hammer to open out this this opening here so that it's the right profile to meet the tunnel, get everything fitting how it should. So that's next. I think easiest way to do that, clamp it in the trusty vise there. I've got a piece of wood inside to stop me from fully squashing it. There's going to be a lot of back and forth, trial and error, just gently opening that out. It's moving pretty easy, the stuff's not that thick, so we'll get that fitting as good as we can. That's another thing to tick off the list. It's a bit tricky getting in there with the hammer, but the offcut from the piece of scaffold tube on the front there is coming in handy. Always like to keep stuff like that. Looking better already. Okay, got the tunnel fitting relatively good. This flange here on the front portion, it needs to come down slightly still, not by much, but what you'll notice is that these stampings, they're pretty rough, so there's a fairly large radius on that corner there. So the easiest way for me to bring this flange down effectively is to clamp it nice and tight in the vise there, and then tap it down on the top, which will flatten this portion down and in turn move it that way, if that makes sense. I've already done that side, works like a charm. It sharpens up some of these corners a bit because they look a little bit naff. So I'm just going to go around the whole thing and neaten up all those edges, make them fit a bit better. Again, it's difficult to get in there with a hammer, so I'm just using that. It's just an old piece of round bar with the end just the sharpness taken off the edges, so it doesn't dig in so hard. So it's probably going to be a bit noisy. Put your fingers in your ears. Works like a charm. It's probably a bit hard to see in there in the shadows, but we got that fitting nice and tight now. Everything fitting a hell of a lot better than it did straight out the box, because it just doesn't fit, but that's reproduction panels all over. I couldn't resist laying in one of these nice shortened floor pan halves. That's a pretty good, well, that shows you how much we're going to need to shorten this thing by. This is still going to require a bit of trimming. They give you a little bit of extra meat all the way around just so you can finesse it, get it to fit properly, but yeah, we're getting somewhere. That'll do, figuring stuff out for the front. I'm going to come and work on the back for a bit of a change. It's nice to mix it up. Just been chipping away all this lovely stuff. More like a sort of seam sealery type goop over all these joins. I'm going to dig all that out, do it nicely. The other reason for digging it out is I want to chop these off. Not even too short, they're called really, the outriggers I suppose. Either way, they're all rotten as well. Got some replacement ones, so they're little weld up there, more welds down there. I've got more gunk to chip off there. We'll whip these off and then see how the new ones fit. That's one of them done away with. Literally trimmed it down to just having some little nubs left. Sanded those off with a nice coarse 36 grit disc. So that's what was there before. That's a new one. That goes in there like that. Before I chop out the other side, I'll take a few reference measurements so I know exactly where these go, because once I've sanded off all the evidence of where they're meant to go, I'll have lost that information. So a few measurements, jot those down, chop that one out. As is always the way with these projects, there's always something you run into that makes you go, this is more work than I thought it would be. But it's what you sign up for when you start doing something like this. I enjoy doing the work. It's not the end of the world. Basically what I've discovered is that the flat portion on the underneath of the chassis spine, obviously we're flipped over at the moment, is not rotten, but you can tell where water has been pulled up inside the chassis when the car was sat in a field for a period of time. And basically on the outside edge there, where there was no corrosion at all, I could measure the thickness at a shade over 2 millimeters. And in the center, where there was lots of loose flaky rust and everything inside here when I dismantled it, measuring there, we're a shade over a millimeter, about 1.1, 1.2 mil. So that's actually rotted away. It would probably be fine, but without giving too much away, there's going to be a bit more power in the back of this thing than Volkswagen ever intended. So I want this thing to be strong, safe, solid. So what I've decided to do is go along with the old spot weld drill, like I showed you before, drilling out all these spot welds, going to remove this lower panel. It's a bit of a bonus actually having to remove this, looking on the bright side, because all the sort of cable conduits that run inside, clutch cable, accelerator cable, I've got good access to those now. I will do once I've removed this. So I can make sure that none of those are ever going to be sort of rattling around in the future. It's going to make life easier when it comes to shortening the chassis. I can then do away with the heater cables and all that business, which doesn't need to be there. So it's a fair bit more work, and I'm actually toying with the idea of replacing this panel with something substantially thicker than what they come with. Just because, a beach buggy, there's all that holds it together really is the chassis. The fiberglass body on top offers a bit of rigidity, bit of added stiffness, but the majority of it is here in the chassis. So if I can make it better, I can make it stronger. It's more work, but it's going to make for a better job in the long run. So for the next couple of hours, I've got the nice job of drilling out all these spot welds, peeling this away, and then we can have a look at what's going on inside. So once again, the process for doing this is locate where the spot welds are. One easy way to do this, I find, is just to run lightly over the top with a sanding disc and a grinder. And just where these parts are a little bit lower, it sort of exposes where the spot weld is. So I'll get my spring-loaded centre punch, find the centre, pop a little dimple in it. And as I showed you before, you got your sort of flat-ended drill bit with a little spike. Just locate that into the divot. The trick with this is to not drill too far, because I only want to go through this layer, not the bottom one. So if you're really paying attention, sometimes it takes a sort of little bit of a drill, move it away, little bit of a drill, move it away. You can often see like maybe a little sort of puff of brown rust will come out. That lets you know you're just about to pop through to the next layer, and you stop drilling because you don't want to go too far. So there we go. You should be able to just see a bit of rust around the outside there. That's as far as we need to go. By the time I get in there with a pry bar or a chisel, it should just pop loose. Easy. We're in. See you in hell. See what I mean? All of this business, all of those flakes, that is all from the underside of that. So I'm really glad we've chopped that out. And you can see where we've rotted through there. It's probably going to be the majority of the way along there. We're going to have to cut that out. I'm really glad we got in there. Wouldn't have been a proper job if we didn't do that. Just to show you in a bit more detail what goes on inside these things, we've got these tubes, these conduits here. So the bigger one is the clutch cable, the smaller one is the throttle cable, these two are handbrake cables, and these ones are heater control cables. So the heater control cables, to be honest, we're probably going to chop them out, do away with them. We don't need those, don't need a heater in a beach buggy, so while we've got access to everything, they might as well go. at this point I can start to work out roughly where I think I'm going to chop the section out to shorten it. It's about 15 inches that needs to come out. I'm not sure if it's exactly 15 inches. I'll have to measure the body and take some reference measurements. But I've noticed in this chassis here, you can see it there, sort of a dimple. This section here is sunk in slightly, and that comes to about here. Now, usually people remove the section behind the handbrake here, but that would sort of end up halfway through this dimple here. And my logic is, I need to chop off half of this business anyway and weld up these holes and everything, because those were the old heater controls. We don't need those. So I'm going to end up, I was toying with the idea of just making a new bracket to hold the handbrake anyway that was a little bit better looking and a bit neater. So I'm actually thinking it does actually measure pretty much 15 inches from here to here on this recessed section. So I'm thinking of chopping out this entire area and then just making a new hole and a new bracket for the handbrake in the top. I'll have to remember to weld in some new seatbelt anchorage points as well. That's not set in stone yet. I think that's what we're going to do. What I've done here is made this paper template, which is a perfect fit over this area here. So now that I've moved that back 15 inches, you can see we do have a bit of a daylight gap on both sides, where the tunnel is slightly narrower on this end, but it's about 5 or 6 mil on either side. So my logic is I can either do a sort of relief cut down the center here and open this out, or I can do one down the front there and close that in, or even a combination of the two to make the profile right. I think it's just going to end up a neater job overall without having to deal with this recess here. It'd make things from here appear smooth and flowing from one part into the other. So that's one of the next jobs. Obviously we've got some rust repair to do as well. I might do a bit of both at the same time, to be honest. We'll play it by ear and see how it goes. So I guess this is the right place to call it end of part 1 of building ourselves a Volkswagen based beach buggy. Now the next video is going to be a fun one, because we're going to get to chop the thing in half, close it up, weld it back together, make this into a short wheelbase chassis, and we'll be one step closer to having our buggy together. As I said earlier, it's a lot of work for me to be making these videos, because it's a lot of work to be building the car in the first place. And as I've never done any of this kind of filming or editing before, it's probably going to take me 5 times longer than it would anybody else. So I never ever thought I'd be the like and subscribe and all that business guy, but it probably will help me if you could like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video on Facebook or Instagram or any of that stuff. Speaking of Instagram, my page is Neil of Steel with underscores in between. Go follow on there, and I'll probably be posting as I'm building this thing with sort of updates in between the videos. So if you like what you've seen, check it out on there as well. And I'll see you soon on part 2 of building a beach buggy. Now, go out in the garage and build something. It's fun. See you later.